This is the first of our webinar series that Epsilon Sigma Phi has done with peer-reviewed proposals. And so this group happens to be from California, and they're doing a session on facing the challenges of embracing diversity. Looking forward to hearing from them. The team includes Lupita Fabregas, Dorina Espinoza, and Russell Hill. And they're each going to tell you more about themselves as well as what they're working on. So I'm going to turn it over to Russell.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a little bit about our team, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the presentation that we're going to be doing today. Again, my name is Russell Hill, and thank you on behalf of the team from California. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar, and I will document our efforts with the Intercultural Development Inventory as part of our process that we use here in California to address diversity and expansion of our program and inclusivity. Next, Dorina Espinoza will cover our diversity work group, and Lupita Fabregas will follow with our Latino pilot project, the summary, and the closing. We hope today's webinar will be of use to you. To that end, I would like to share our expected outcomes. So by the end of the webinar, extension professionals will have access to materials to begin the process of increasing diversity and inclusion while working with their clientele. And we'll have an introduction to the intentional effort needed to serve diverse clientele. Please hold any questions to the end. They can be posted in the chat pod, and we'll address them as time permits. So while the context of our work is in the 4-H realm, please take note of the process and the organization so that you can adapt them for your specific needs and clientele. So this photo represents the diversity work group through which all of the efforts towards a more interculturally competent staff, increased clientele diversity, and inclusion efforts and culturally adapted programs work is being viewed. So UC, Division of Ag and Natural Resources, of which we are all a part of from California, and which our 4-H Youth Development Program sits within, was challenged with creating systems and organizational change to increase the diversity and inclusion of our 4-H program. In this section, I'll review the IDI portion in support of the goal towards interculturally competent staff. So don't let this slide overwhelm you. I'll talk about it here. You don't need to memorize all the information, but let me talk about it. So let's review what we mean when we're talking about intercultural competence. So defined, intercultural competence is the capability to shift cultural perspective and appropriately adapt behavior to cultural differences and commonalities. We're using the Mitch Hammer 2009 definition in this case. So the development of intercultural competence involves gaining a more complex understanding of how one engages cultural diversity, and it's reflected in how one makes sense of and responds to cultural differences in terms of one's own culturally learned perceptions, values, and practices, and the different ways people from other cultural groups make sense of and respond to cultural differences. So using this iceberg metaphor, let's discuss culture. First, we have the visible part of culture. The part above that includes things such as dress, heroes, artifacts, food, symbols, language, music, games, and so on. Then there's the invisible part of culture, the part below the waterline. And that would include values, perceptions, gender roles, worldviews, and much more. Much of this part of culture is what we're trying to address in our staff development practices. But first, let's take a look at the critical moment as to the reasons behind this effort. So in 2013, a review by the USDA, they found that, quote, the 4-H youth development programs were not in compliance with the University of California Cooperative Extension's obligation in reaching underrepresented youth. Of all underrepresented youth groups in California, California's 4-H biggest gap is with the Latino population of our state. This slide documents Cotter's 8-step change model, a model that we use to develop and implement a plan of action to fundamentally change the 4-H youth development programmatic and institutional landscape to meet the needs of a culturally and ethnically diverse youth population. 4-H academics adapted the Intercultural Development Inventory program-wide. So that's what I'm going to talk about, our IDI process. So we're going to look at these steps here, and it's step 1. It focuses on creating a sense of urgency. So in 2012, 2013, we had that USDA report that highlighted the need to engage a growing Latino youth population that's underrepresented in our 4-H youth development program. Financial and organizational support was obtained by senior leadership, and 9 academics served as project champions. Step 2, we identify and build a guiding team. So in February of 2014, a team was formed and trained to become qualified administrators of the IDI. The team learned about intercultural development continuum, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. The IDI components, how to administer the IDI, review and interpret those results, and provide feedback and coaching to the individuals who participated. The third step was to develop an uplifting vision to obtain buy-in from 4-H personnel. We reframed the 4-H motto, which is to make the best better, to include building intercultural competence as a key element. We placed intercultural competence as one of 6 intentional strategies to achieve diversity and inclusion goals. The fourth step was to communicate the vision and strategy frequently, powerfully, and embed it in everything that we did. The vision and strategy was shared with county directors and 4-H personnel over a span of 6 months. Updates were provided monthly on virtual brown bag phone calls, at events, activities, and conferences. Step 5, we begin to remove organizational change obstacles. So 88 4-H personnel completed the baseline assessment. The IDI QAs provided group feedback sessions to increase buy-in and trust with the process. Step 6, sustain organizational change and empower personnel and an ongoing systematic professional development approach. So those 88 personnel participated in individual feedback sessions with their IDI QA to support the interpretation of their IDI results, developed a long-term intercultural development goals, and implemented their intercultural development plan. Our team organized 10 community of practice meetings for 67 of those individuals. So not everybody participated in the communities of practice, and we continued sharing and reflection of their self-development, experiences with diverse groups and work practices, among other topics. So finally, 67 personnel attended a 2-day statewide intercultural development conference that increased their knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Step 7, we acknowledge and celebrate the early signs of progress. 65 of those 67 who have participated in the 2-day statewide training completed the post-test of the IDI. We shared those results at professional conferences and we celebrated the progress. So we're leveraging those wins to create more organizational change, and we're developing tactics to institutionalize a pluralistic organization. The IDI is now implemented with new hires as part of standard practice in the University of California's Division of Ag and Natural Resources 4-H development program. We have since begun a second cohort consisting of 25 county-based staff who will be engaged in a similar process to that as described earlier, while the first cohort will be engaged in new learning activities. Now, you're probably wondering, so what is the IDI? Well, this is the visual representation of what we're trying to achieve. The IDC, or the Intercultural Development Continuum, describes a set of orientations toward cultural difference and commonality that are arrayed along a continuum from the more monocultural mindset of denial and polarization through the transitional orientation of minimization and the intercultural or global mindset of acceptance and adaptation. The capability of deeply shifting cultural perspective and bridging behavior across cultural differences is most fully achieved when one maintains an adaptation perspective. One could also view this as a bell curve, with the majority of individuals falling into minimization, and that we have the trailing ends of denial and adaptation. So quickly, denial, there's little recognition of more complex cultural differences. A person in polarization, it has a judgmental orientation. It's an us and them view. Minimization highlights cultural commonalities, but it masks deeper recognition of cultural differences. Acceptance recognizes cultural commonality and difference in your own and other cultures. And an individual in adaptation is able to shift cultural perspective and adapt behavior to cultural context. So remember, we had 88 4-H staff and academics across California who completed the baseline assessment of the intercultural competence using the IDI. This 50-item IDI is a cross-culturally generalizable, valid, and reliable assessment of intercultural competence. The IDI generates an individual and group profile of the respondent's position on the intercultural development continuum, ranging from that monocultural mindset in denial through the more intercultural, through the perspective of an individual who's in adaptation, that more broader piece there. There are 5 orientations along the continuum, again, denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. 65 staff and academics completed the post-test IDI 2 years later. Following participation in that series of intentional professional development opportunities. 17 individuals left the organization over the 2-year period, and 5 did not take the post-test. So if we take a look at the developmental orientation, we have the pre-test at the top. There's the cohort 1. And at that time, we had a score of 98.97, which places us right below optimization. Looking at the post-test, after the interventions that we used, where we had the statewide conferences as well as the communities of practice, we have a post-test of 110.06, which puts us at the cusp of acceptance. And that's kind of moving us in towards that global mindset. So as we take a look at this, we also note that the finding demonstrates that as an organization, we're more culturally competent, have moved from that focus on similarities across diverse people to one of a more complex, looking at more complex dimensions of diversity. These findings are important as they are the skills and characteristics that lead to an organizational culture that incorporates mutual respect, acceptance, teamwork, and productivity among diverse people, and which resulted in this positive change. There were also significant decreases in the differences between one's actual and perceived intercultural competence, indicating that as an organization, there has been a decrease in the degree to which 4-H personnel overestimate our own intercultural competence. Finally, controlling for baseline levels of intercultural competence, the time spent building intercultural competence using that self-reflective, intentional process significantly predicted increases in intercultural competence. So this shows, or this indicates that our educational intervention played an important role in leading to positive, sustainable, and organizational change in intercultural competence. Because of the success of our first cohort, we have now begun a second cohort. They will go through a similar process as the first group, while cohort 1 will continue its journey through the more intercultural learning efforts, another statewide intercultural competence conference, and the implementation of those learning circles. We will continue to track the changes and report our efforts. So at this point, I want to ask, are there any questions on that, clarifying questions that you may have before we move on to the next presentation by Dorina?
Nope, no questions at this time.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dorina, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a advisor in 4-H and Nutrition, Family, Consumer Sciences up in what we call the true Northern California, where the redwoods are. And I'm happy to talk with you now about the diversity work group. So the first slide that Russell showed you was a funnel that had the work of the diversity work group, including intercultural development, this work group in and of itself, and what Lupita will talk about, which is the intentional outreach in the efforts in some of our counties here in California for Latino families. But what I'm going to share is how we came to this place that we're actually talking with you today. So we, as Russell shared, we developed a team in 2013. So next slide, please, Russell. Next slide. Next. We also talked about where we were trained in intercultural development, but even before that, we came together to come to understand and try to get an assessment of what was the current landscape of 4-H as it relates to outreaching to a diverse audience, outreaching to the members of our community that weren't yet represented in at least the 4-H program, because that was our focus. And how were we going to go about, what were going to be our goals and so forth. So this team that we created, and we wanted to intentionally include some personnel folks, both staff and academic personnel folks, in order to start to create the space for future hires that were trying to help us attain our goals of bringing in diverse clients into our programming. So that was an intentional part of our team creation early on. Another intentional part of our team creation was bringing in family and consumer science advisor academics as well. So as I shared, we did this environmental scan. Next slide, please, Russell. And that environmental scan was a phone calls that some of us on the team made to our colleagues across the entire state to get a sense of what were the programs that were happening in our communities. And were those programs still in existence? Were they episodic in that they were grant-based but non-sustainable? So we looked at programming, and we asked things like their name, the name of the program, the funding source, if there was any, who was involved in that intervention, how many youth were actually involved, what was the demographics of those youth, what were the activities, the goals, and many more questions were asked during those phone conversations with our colleagues than is presented here on this slide. But I just provided this slide to give you a sense of what was that environmental scan that we did across the state of California, so we too could understand what our program looks like at the state level. Next slide, please. So after that environmental scan, we had a colleague conduct a, and I'm not sure why it's not on this slide, but conduct a literature review on programming with youth development across the nation. And what do we know about programming and youth development across the nation? Also, what Russell shared, what we did early on in this diversity work group was train our administrators, actually go out and talk about the process of this diversity work group and our intercultural development training. And that the really key part of the buy-in with our administrators and the buy-in with administrators at the county level was to ensure that any staff time that was going to be dedicated to intercultural development was going to be supported at the county level by their county director. So that was a key part to make sure we had buy-in at the county level. Okay, next slide, please. So we then, we get buy-in from the county, we have an environmental scan, we have our literature review, which is going to guide our goal development, and we have the support at the county level for staff and academics to work on intercultural development, to work on diversification of our programming and diversification of our clients. So we set out and created 7 goals. So the goals of this diversity work group were, first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we created this welcoming, inclusive, and fun environment for advisors and staff in the diversity work group and in our 4-H program. Now, we have Latino here specifically because that, as Lupita will share with you, that was and has been the focus here in California. However, it could be other cultural and ethnic individuals as well. So we also wanted to make sure that we developed a relationship with our stakeholders, both at our community level in the counties and at our state level. We wanted to understand and identify what are those factors in our programs and the way we do our programming and our practices and the way our programming is guided in our policies. That was actually impacting the participation of Latinos and other ethnic and racial groups included in their participation and inclusion in 4-H. So we also want to identify how 4-H itself could best respond to the needs, the hopes, the dreams, and desires of our Latino youth families and volunteers. Next slide, please. The other 3 goals that we had were to develop the capacity within our organization. This was a really key part, as Russell has shared with you already, that the capacity within our organization among the staff and we hope later with our volunteers to build and sustain participation of Latino participants. And for us, that capacity meant intercultural development. As Russell shared, it's been primarily the staff right now that have been involved in this development of intercultural capacity, but we hope to bring volunteers in the fold. Another goal was to assess how current delivery modes, the ones that we're already using in our communities, how those are responding to the needs of our Latino participants. And we wanted to expand the reach of 4-H Latino audiences through innovative programming, just in case the current delivery methods weren't actually responding to the needs. We wanted to create new programming in collaboration with our community. Next slide. So these were our goals. So our goals influenced our objectives, and our objectives, of course, were influenced by, or objectives led our activities. So one of the activities and accomplishments of the diversity work group was something we were calling fact sheets. So our fact sheets had a life, and on the left side you'll see these 8 circles, well, 7 circles and 1 star, where we went through this process of the literature review, of adapting the information to our specific audience, developing these fact sheets, which I'll talk about in a moment, presenting these fact sheets to individuals who were in a position of making a decision around the issue addressed in the fact sheet, and using these fact sheets to actually create the space, whether that was the practice and or the policy and or the programming for diversification of our clients and our programming. So on the right side of the slide is an actual example of a fact sheet that we're still working on, and it's about building partnerships. Now remember, this may seem, building partnerships may seem for us an extension. Well, that's what we do, right? We are about building partnerships and extension. However, we're actually created a fact sheet specific to the clients that we didn't yet have a partnership with, to the clients that we weren't yet serving, to the clients that weren't yet involved and included in our programming. So this fact sheet around building partnerships was truly addressing a void, a gap in our in extension within 4-H extension programming. So the fact sheet has many components that you may be able to see here. The top part is what we call the reality, and in that are the facts. So for example, in building partnership, that fact, one of those is partnerships are critical to learning and understanding the unique assets Latino youth can contribute to the organization. And so, again, I think in extension, we think of ourselves as this is our job, this is what we do. However, when we're working with audiences and community members that aren't yet part of our programming, sometimes we need that reminder of what it means to actually work with clients that we aren't actually working with presently. So looking at those assets that the client base that we're interested in reaching out to can bring to the programming. So then the other part of our fact sheet on the bottom half of this right side image is research and promising practices. So for example, in this one, we say that most research focuses on partnering with schools, though some emphasize the need for networks that also engage other types of institutions. And then what wasn't included in this slide are the other components of a fact sheet, which are what is it that we're asking of the programming, of the delivery of the programming at the county level, of the policies at the state level. What are those recommendations and the responses that we're asking for? And this particular fact sheet, one of those was monitor and strengthen our reputation of the program within the community that we're interested in targeting. So that's one of our accomplishments within 4-H was the fact sheets. Next slide, please. So another accomplishment was that California was heavily involved in what is now the National 4-H Council Latino Youth Outreach Best Practices Toolkit. As were other states involved, but California also contributed to that toolkit, directly bringing in the work from the diversity work group into that toolkit. For example, the literature review that I spoke with and our process of our intercultural development. We continue to do another accomplishment as we continue to actually work on our intercultural development. There is no end to continuing to improve our capacity as it relates to intercultural development. And we're actually creating new programming specifically for the client base that we're interested in reaching. Next slide, please. Another accomplishment is that of recent past, you'll see Russell in this picture. Another colleague behind Russell is Faye Moncloa, who's also part of our team. We just recently received a National Extension Diversity Award. So we're quite pleased with that, and it does, for us, kind of help us ensure that we're on the right track. You know, we're doing the work that we intended to do. We're not just kind of spinning our wheels, so to speak, in our work group. Oh, there's the bullet that has the reference to our literature review by Nancy Erbstein and her graduate student, Fabio, in 2014, Latino Youth Participation in Youth Development Programs. Next slide, please. So other accomplishments is we presented at conferences and we've been networking with our colleagues across the nation. Cambio de Colores is a conference, for example, that we presented at, as well as National Association of 4-H Extension Agents and other conferences as well. So next slide, please. So what are our next steps? So we want to continue to expand our diversity reach, as I said earlier, that we have focused on Latino, but we're expanding that. For example, I'm working with tribal communities in my counties. We also, another next step is to continue relevant program development. So is, for example, the program that we have for college and career readiness that we all recently went through a training from North Carolina called Juntos, would that programming be relevant for the tribal community that I'm going to be working with? If not, how might we change that so it's relevant to the community that we're working with? We've also created this clearinghouse for diversity research and evaluation within the work group. And we are developing trainings for our staff. And as I said earlier, our volunteers haven't been as involved in this process of intercultural development, so we want to create trainings for the volunteers. And we're continuing to improve and expand our marketing of 4-H to new client base. So at this point, I'll ask if there's any questions on this section of the presentation, even Russell's section.
Nope, no questions at this time.
Great. And now I'll leave it to my colleague, Lupita Fabregas.
Hey, this is Lupita Fabregas, and I want to say that I was born and raised in Mexico. I learned English when I was around 40. So you are gonna feel my strong accent. So I'm gonna try to speak very slowly so you can understand me better. So basically what I'm gonna talk right now is about the how are we gonna do this, or are we doing this? So Ross and Dorina talk about the preparation that we have before in order to get to the point where we are right now, where we are reviewing the programs, we are developing and adapting and designing programs that are cultural responsive to attract and serve our Latino communities. Next one, please. Basically, what we are trying to do is we were not happy just living in a multicultural environment or try to make reasonable efforts to join or to serve the population. What we are trying to do is becoming intercultural competent so the people that we are serving in our state can feel and we can foster inclusion and make these people feel that they are welcome and they have this sense of belonging in the programs that we offer as the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So what is the idea? Next, please. So the idea that we have is basically is to put together all the things that we have developed and the things that we are working in and try to design a model that we can replicate not only in the 7 counties that we are working right now or in our state, but basically nationwide. What we have found is that we have, in some environmental scan that we conducted, is that we selected and we know that a lot of people around the United States are making efforts to reach new audiences and in 4-H, but basically we don't have that information all together, or we are not using that information in a way that can be easy for the people in the field to work with new audiences. So that's what we are trying to do. So we are not like just trying to make a reasonable effort. We are really trying to develop a model that can work in other places. Next, please. So the commitment that the University of California Division of Agriculture has is huge. They are investing $2 million, and basically the money is first to hire me. That was a very absolutely good move. And then we hired 7 new program reps. They are bilingual and they are bicultural, and their job is specifically to reach the Latino communities in our state. We also hire a person that is developing marketing materials that are in general bilingual to try to reach this population. Next one, please. So to do that, we designed a job description for these new 7 program reps, and this is the process that we are following. First, we have a diagnosis, then we identify the programs and adapt the programs and train the people to deliver those programs. Then we implement the program, we evaluate, we disseminate, and we go back to the diagnosis again. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each one of these components. So next, please. So where are we at? Next, please. The first stage, so where are we at right now? So we are now the staff involved in this process, that is 7 program reps, that is the equivalent of extension educator in other states, and 7 advisors who are responsible to to lead the effort in each one of the counties. We complete 2 trainings, and we are right now getting involved with the Latino community. We believe that if we go back to the roots of the extension and 4-H, and we are part of the community, we are going to be more successful reaching them, making them trust us. And we are developing partnership with other organizations serving the Latino communities. This is very important because instead of looking at them, this organization as our competition, we are looking at them as our partners. And we are trying to work together with them to make this happen. And absolutely, when we identify the Latino communities, we ask them, what do they need from us? What kind of programs they would like to have? How do we want to work together with us? Next, please. So basically, this is one chart that was developed by some of our colleagues, and this is helping our program reps to get to know the community. And basically, we identify all the institutions that are working, the individuals that are being clue or very instrumental in helping the Latino communities, the associations. And we are also identifying the places where they meet and the things that are important for the communities that we are trying to serve. The businesses, the places where they get their information and everything. One example, next please. I'm going to show you what is Merced County doing. And Ross is the one in the boss here in the Merced County. So we put together a map and we identify where the Latino communities are living and what kind of services they are receiving from other organizations, as well as where can we find them and ask them what do they need from us. So in each one of the counties that we are selecting to participate right now in the pilot program, we already have a map and we know where the Latino communities are gathering. The next one, please. So another thing that we are doing, next one, is trying to select and adapt the programs. And what I'm trying to do since the beginning is working as a team. We are 14 people working together, and the idea is that we can share the information and document the information that we are finding. We have face-to-face meetings, we have virtual bar banks, cafecitos, and we talk a lot to each other. Even, for example, they travel from one county to another. And we are working as a volunteer in some of the organizations that we selected as the clue organizations working with Latino. Next one, please. In the process of the implementation of the program, what we are doing is we are trying to do 2 things. One is supporting new projects inside the traditional 4-H community clubs, and another one is supporting new clubs, 4-H clubs targeted specifically Latino communities. There are a lot of conversation about this. What we are trying is to make 4-H and extension make sense to the people that we are serving. And that's the most important part of our work. How can they approach us and how can we serve them better? Next one. We also have an evaluation team, and this evaluation team has been making focus groups, needs assessments. They report monthly what are they doing, and we keep a journal of everything that we are doing. Remember that what we are trying is to replicate the model, so we need to be very proactive in collecting the information and reviewing that information, because we want to be leaders in this initiative of inclusion and sense of belonging. And to be leaders, we need to share with our colleagues what is working and what is not working. So this is the most important part of our job, is to sit down and reflect about the things that we are doing in our job. So everybody's writing a lot, everybody's working together and sharing the experience, so we can have enough information to share with our counties and with other states. Next one, please. So another thing that we are doing is trying to work and develop marketing materials to try to engage the Latino community in the 4-H programs, in the extension services. So we have been translating a lot of materials and trying to make things that are papers that are going to the houses. We are trying to do bilingual, but the kids we have found out that the kids speak better English, of course, than I speak. So they are very good. So they don't have problems to understand English, but the concept of extension is the hard part to translate, because for us living in the United States, cooperative extension means something, but for people that are not used to receive the services that we provide, that doesn't make any sense. So basically, the marketing campaign is more than just translating the materials. It's making those materials in a way that the people can understand what we do. Next one, please. And we are trying, for example, for all the statewide conference, we are offering the information in English and in Spanish, so the parents can at least read what we are offering, and maybe later on they are going to be willing to send their kids to these kind of experiences. Next one. So are these efforts working? I think that's the main clue of our efforts, and I can show you that right now in the state of California, we have 85,000 kids enrolled in 4-H. And we have been, from last year to this year, from 2016 to 2015, 16.1% of increment in the number of kids serving by 4-H. And one of the things that is amazing is that 41% of these kids are Latinos. We are not set in, our programs are not reflecting the demographic of our state yet, because I don't know if you know, but 51% of the kids enrolled in K-12 in the state of California are Latinos. So we need to keep working hard to make that happen. Another thing is that some of our community clubs are growing, and this is important because part of the debate in all of this is that how can we offer our 4-H kids the same opportunities that other kids have in the program? And we have found out that community clubs is just one form to offer this opportunity, but there are a lot of delivery modes that we are trying. And of course, the community clubs, some of the kids participating in the community clubs have been growing. So I will say that it's only 1 year, and I don't think that we can talk a lot about this, but I'm confident that this initiative is working, and we are trying to build this from the ground up, and I hope that we can be successful. Next one. Another thing that we have been doing, because they approach us, and we are, as you know, California is a border state with California, Baja California and Mexico. They approach us and they invite us to advise them opening 4-H clubs in Mexico, and we are also doing that. And this is a very intercultural experience for our advisors. So we are helping them just like being advisors, but I think at the end, who is winning in this initiative are all the people involved in California, involved in the program, because that helps us to understand the majority of the people are immigrants in our state came from Mexico, and it's helping us to understand this. Remember that I think that 4-H brings to the table just a lot of hope and a lot of opportunities for the youth population. It doesn't matter the country or the state. Next one, please. So I hope that I'm going to say that these are efforts that we are leading in the state of California. It has not been easy. It's hard to work with people that are not very used to the services that we provide. But I think that we have an amazing team of advisors and program reps. And I'm confident that in maybe 5 or 6 years, we are going to reflect in our 4-H program the demographic of our state. So next one, please. So if you would like to have more information about this webinar or about the materials that California is developing, please go to our webpage. The webpage is there, and you are going to have access to the material through this and through the recording that the ESP is doing. Next one. So going back to the first expected outcomes that we shared at the beginning, I hope that you have access to materials to begin the process of increasing diversity and inclusion. And I will say that here, that remember, as extension professionals, we need to engage all the population in the United States, not just the people like me or the people that I like to work with. So we have a huge responsibility, because it's not just because they pay us to do this, but it's because it's the right thing to do. So I hope that you join our efforts, and if you have any information that you think that will be relevant to test or to try in California, we are an open team that will be more than happy to try anything that you suggest. And another thing is, I hope that it's not just an introduction, but I just put the information here, and we as a team have enough information for you to start with working with Latinos and other minority populations. So I think that's the last one that I have. Rose, do you have next slide, please? And do you have any other questions or comments that I think that we have some time. Mark, I don't know if you want to take over.
Yeah, there's no questions at this time, but I would encourage our attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to enter those in Q&A or chat. Either one of those is fine.
I did want to share quickly 2 points. Dorina shared about the fact sheet process, the fact sheets that we've created. We're in the process of having those, our Division of Ag and Natural Resources is a little bit behind on actually having those printed out and available for you. They should be available really soon. Number 2, the process that we used, we actually completed a Journal of Extension article that should be somewhere coming up in July or August. We had the acceptance, sent back the responses to that, and they give us about a 2 to 3 month window. So somewhere in July, August, that'll be ready. And then the other part we had listed here, Mark, thank you for putting that in the chat pod, our link to our state website. We apologize right now in that our stuff's kind of everywhere on that website. We are trying to gather one location, and that's part of our diversity work group, to start putting all the marketing and outreach information and the processes that we use and all the other aspects of our Latino engagement program processes onto one location, so people don't have to dig around. Right now, you're going to have to dig around just a little bit to find those resources.
Okay, folks, we've got about 10 minutes. So any questions anyone has, please, we encourage you to put those in Q&A. I'm wondering if you guys, whoever would like to take this or comment on it, please do, about engaging Latino folks, and I guess you could use this for immigrants in general. What are some of the challenges there, and maybe with the current political climate, has it made it harder to engage folks and to be able to interact with the immigrant population?
One thing that we have discovered, Mark, and I think that's important, is when they know, the people that we are trying to engage, they don't know anything about the extension of 4-H or the services that we provide. So what we are trying to do is being very intentional of the way that we explain them, that we are from the University of California, that they can trust us. So the first thing that we do is we meet in a place where they feel safe. And it can be the church, or it can be some community like a building, or any place where they feel safe. Then we detect the leader of the community, and we try to talk with him about what we are trying to do. And when the leader is on board, everything is super easy. Then after we have that, we try to reach the youth population, and the answer has been incredible. Because one day, for example, we went to a church, and the next day we have 30 kids enrolled. So it's not that they don't know. They are not with us because they don't know about us. But as soon as they know what is for extension and what is 4-H, they are 100% on board. So it's those topics that we have been discussing about 4-H is not for Latinos. That's not true. 4-H is for Latinos when they know what is 4-H. or extension services are not for minorities or migrant communities. Of course they are, because the problem is to engage them and to let them know that they can trust us. After that, of course, you have to work in the culture, because it's not the same thing to work with Russell or Dorina or Beth or Mark that will work with the Latino population. So we need to learn all these cultural dimensions that are so important for to deal with culture. That's what the job or the work of the IDI is so important. If we want to treat everybody the same, that's a big mistake when we are working with diverse populations. So we are trying everything, and we are documented what we have been successful, and hopefully this information will help other states.
And Lupita, I wanted to share just a little bit too. I think part of the process, this reflective process I've had, is that I think I'm going back to the roots of extension, where particularly 4-H, where it was sort of a subversive technique the university was using to work by creating these corn clubs to show these other processes of growing corn and using additives and things like that. I'm not the expert, so excuse my language there. But using this, we're going back to the very roots of this to go back and show to these groups, who are we first, why should they trust us, and then build from that bottom up. So that we, one of the research groups that we're doing here in California is called From the Ground Up. We're recreating this whole process from the bottom up and working with these groups who don't or are not aware of us to the level that they want to participate in the programs we're providing.
I'm going to put a link in chat. I did we hosted a webinar last month on engaging, the title of it was Engaging Seasonal and Migrant Farm Workers. These folks were in Minnesota and I think Wisconsin, and they just sort of shared some of their experiences with engaging immigrant and seasonal worker population. And one of the things that struck me is you come up to someone and start asking them their name and trying to get their phone number and what their address is, and folks are going to be very they're not going to be really ready to want to share that kind of information. So I think your point is well taken. You have to be careful about how you engage folks and sort of do it in a mindful way.
One of the points we've come across too is because we have that connection to education and higher education through the extension program, I think that kind of gives us a little bit more credibility within the Latino audience, particularly in the community that I worked with. The majority of the individuals are coming from Mexico, 3 states that I work with, and they have a high respect for teachers. If the teacher says something, particularly in school, you do that. That's, they tell that to the student, the parents say you do that. And so we've got this little bit of extra bonus in the community that I'm working with, again, particularly, is that aspect of higher education in relation to teachers, maestro, maestra, and so on.
Great. Okay, folks, we'll take another minute and pause for questions. If not, we'll wrap things up. So let's give folks another 30 seconds or minute to ask any questions. Another part of the conversation was with engaging folks is what are the tools that you use, and one of the conversation was around social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter and those kind of things, that a lot of this population is very, there's a high saturation of or use of smartphones and that technology. So that was one of the other things that sort of struck me that was a part of the conversation, was the use of social media to engage folks.
And I will say that to end this, I really would like to say that the people, the Latino communities and other minorities, they need to know more about extension, because maybe they have the perception that it's only for agriculture. And if we say, we talk about nutrition and family and consumer sciences and 4-H and other community development, economic development. So I think that we have so many things to offer to the new the communities that we need to do a better job trying to reach them and show them what we can do for them.
I just want to share, I wear 2 hats in my counties. I am 4-H advisor and I'm nutrition, family, consumer science advisor. there actually is a real barrier for some of our community members to participate in our nutrition ed programs because of issues around fear of immigration, deportation, and vulnerability within our communities. So that actually is something that we have seen. We've seen families who have been enrolled in our nutrition ed programs actually drop out, and we've seen enrollment overall across the state actually decline. So that is something, Mark, that you asked about, and that is real in some of our programming. And I'm encouraging our University of California Ag and Natural Resources Department to create a statement sheet that says what protective measures they're willing to take with data that is our client data. And that's an ongoing process, but I do appreciate your question because that is undeniably a real part of some of our programming, at least in California and likely other states.
I think, yeah, I think that folks are, yeah, that's a sentiment that's shared all around this nation at this point. Arlene in chat asked about, will this presentation be posted publicly? Yep, it'll be available at the Learn event. So you probably came here via this Learn event, but I'll put that in. We'll have a link to the recording there within a couple of days, and then we should be able to get this presentation. Russ, if you'll maybe get Beth a copy of the presentation if she doesn't have it already, we can convert that to a PDF and make that available.
For sure.
All righty. Okay, so I think that's it. Any closing comments?
Well,
Yes, that would be me. I want to thank Lupita, Dorina, and Russell for sharing what they're doing and how it's working in California and giving good ideas to people from across the country that they may be able to use. Even though we didn't have a lot of questions during the session, you may have some, and I hope that you'll follow up with them. Their information, their contact information, I'm sure is on their website. We have the URL for that included. I also want to mention that this is the first of a spring ESP webinar series, and the second is going to be 2 weeks from today on May 16th. It is called Program Design Strategy to Increase Participant Capacity, and it's going to be brought to us from a couple of extension educators in Minnesota. So I hope that you will take some time in a couple weeks and come back. And likewise, it can be found in Learn. I'll give you the link. If you're in the ESP website, there's a link right on the front page, but it's also listed in Learn with a link to a PDF that has all the details in addition to the standard Learn event information. So those are both available provided by ESP, but available to others as well. So thank you very much, and thanks, Mark, for your help with us today and always.
Sure.
Great.
Mark and Beth,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.